friends, this is Chari. Today I'm taking some die cut fruit and making a really fun home decor project. So I was inspired by some of my fellow design team members to use some 3-inch embroidery hoops to create a fun project. Now these 3 hoops will fit across a wood panel that I have. This measures 12 inches across by 5 inches tall, and all 3 of these 3-inch hoops will fit right across there, creating a trio of frames. I'll be taking some speckled eggshell cardstock, cut with the largest of the scallop circles, and I will be putting one of these scallop circles behind each of these embroidery hoops, creating a fun scallop border around the edge. I'll also be using the fruit salad 12 by 12 paper in the blue, orange, and the green, and I'm going to be using the gingham side along with a 3-inch stitch circle die to cut the inside that will just drop right inside those frames. So I've trimmed down my 12 by 12 pieces to a piece that's a bit wider than 3 inches. This will allow me to figure out exactly where I want this gingham in this circle. And so as you can kind of see, I'm making sure that that darkest square of the gingham is in the center of the circle, and I know all my ginghams will match. So here's just a little preview of how these pieces will stack together, and that gingham will drop right inside that frame. Now for my fruit, I'm using the Zesty Lemons die set, the Cheery Cherries, and the Strawberry Patch die set to create my 3 different circles full of fruit. And I've already cut out all of my pieces, and I just have them laying here kind of organized where they're going to go. So I'll just move this off screen. And I cut all of the pieces for my fruit from the textured canvas cardstock packs. I used the green, the orange and red, the yellow, and the pink to get all of my die cuts for my fruit. So I'm starting out with my lemons, which will be in the center on that orange gingham, and I'm layering that solid piece behind. It is a little bit darker, so those spots on the lemon stand out. Now for the lemon slice, I've cut the pith here from some of that same speckled eggshell cardstock so it will match those scallop circles that I have behind my frames. The solid piece is that lighter yellow, and then I use the darker yellow for the inner piece of the lemon slice. And I'm just picking that up with my embellishment wand and dropping those in the little pie-shaped pieces where I've already put a dot of liquid glue. Now for the little leaves that go with the lemons, I thought I would add a little bit of ink blending, so I have some Lucky Clover Distress ink and a little finger dauber brush, and I'm just adding a bit of darker green to one side of each of the leaves. This just makes them stand out a little bit, gives them some shading, and I really like the 2 colors of green since I have 2 colors on my lemons. Now I can start to assemble my little frame of lemons here, and you can see that I have taken my grid of that gingham pattern paper and lined it up with the grid of my grid mat because I want to make sure that all of the ginghams are straight up and down in all of the frames. So this just makes sure that I put all my pieces where I want them with that grid in the right direction. So I've just glued the leaf at the bottom directly to the background. That large lemon I popped up with some thick foam adhesive, and then for this lemon slice I'm going to pop that up with some thin foam adhesive. So this is going to have some dimension on it. What's kind of nice about those embroidery hoops is because they are deep, you have a lot of space to add some dimension. And you'll see here when I start to assemble things that I am actually going to take this entire circle and pop it up with foam as well, so it is not completely buried into that frame. Now for my other 2 leaves, I am going to add one directly to the card base and then pop up one with some foam adhesive. And I just think that these different layers of foam add a lot of dimension to each of these little vignettes. Now for my cherries, I'm going to do the same thing to that lighter colored leaf. You can see I have a darker one there as well. And then I'm adding some ink blending to the bottom of the cherries using some aged mahogany ink. Now I did feel like I got too much ink on that cherry on the left, but what I decided to do was cut out a single cherry, and I'm going to layer this over that cherry on the left with some foam, and that's going to give me some dimension between the two cherries, which is actually a really fun look. I did this to kind of fix a mistake, but I actually really like the way that this turned out, giving that kind of a look like the cherry in the front is sticking out a little bit more than the cherry in the back. Then I can tuck my stem into those cherries, and I'll just add a little dot of glue behind each of those to kind of tack it in place. So that will just hold my stem in place, tucked into those little slits in the top of the cherries. Now I'm just going to use the leaf from the darker one, not the stem, and the idea is to kind of give it two leaves and that darker one will be in the background. Gives it even more dimension by using the different colors. Now again, I'm lining up the gingham to be straight with the grid mat so that I know the direction my cherries are going to be. And I will just add some foam adhesive to the back of the cherries and the back of the leaf. Now for that dark leaf, I want it to be in the background, kind of tucked behind there. So I'm just going to glue it directly to that pattern paper. I'm going to kind of hold my cherries here so I make sure I glue this darker one right in the right place so that it looks like it is tucked behind that leaf on the front. So that is what my cherries are going to look like. And then I'm moving on to my strawberries. So again, I have a darker piece for the solid piece behind, and I'm just layering this using some liquid glue. I also have the tops of these strawberries, which I cut from that darker green cardstock. And I will repeat the same colors and layering on the larger strawberry. And then to make those leaves match my other leaves in my other panels, I'm adding some of that Lucky Clover ink again. And I'm actually not going to use all of these leaves, but I went ahead and inked the edges of all of them. These leaves are a little bit bigger than my circle, and I really don't need all of that, so I'll be trimming them off and kind of separating them and making it look slightly different. So you can see I took the top two leaves that I will put coming sort of out of the top of my strawberries, and then I will borrow one of the leaves from the bottom down here and kind of figure out where I want that to go. That was a bit too much, so I ended up just using one, and that looks much better, kind of like a little cluster of leaves at the top. So once I have that placement figured out, I will just stick these down using my liquid glue for the leaves. And then I will use some foam adhesive for my strawberries. And I'm just trying to figure out which one I want in the foreground, the big strawberry or the small strawberry. And I ended up putting that small strawberry on top. So I used some thin foam squares for the big one and some thicker foam squares for that smaller one, using a thin foam square where it will overlap that larger strawberry. And I'm just pulling it off to adjust its placement a little bit so that I have space to put my other strawberry in there. And then that panel is finished as well. Now I can start to assemble them, and I'm using my grid mat to make sure my scallops are straight as well. So I'm using the little valleys between the scallops. You can see that the top and the bottom line up with a grid line, as well as the left and the right. And I'll just add some liquid glue to the back of my embroidery hoop. I am making sure that they're all glued down the same. So I'm making sure that the part where you tighten the screw is on the right hand side so that they all match. And lining this up with my grid also helps me make sure that that screw and that clasp at the top is straight at the top. So I'm doing the same method to all 3 of these. And as I move on to the next one, I'm just setting that one aside to dry with a block on top, just so it has a little bit of pressure to hold that hoop in place while the glue sets. It does not take very long at all. So now I have all my frames ready, and I'm ready to drop my little motifs down inside. I was deciding if I wanted them popped up a little bit, and I do, so I'm going to actually make some double thickness tape. So I just folded that back on top of itself. So this is like 2 pieces of tape stacked on top of each other. And this is just going to raise that circular panel up from the background a little bit. I like the way that's looking. I like the thickness of this foam. So I'll go ahead and pull off those liner panels, again, making sure that my grid is straight when I stick this in. And that gingham really helps make sure things are straight because we have that kind of grid to work with. So I will just do the same thing with the strawberries and the cherries, sticking those down with double thickness foam tape. And now I can pull out my panel and I'm ready to put these on my panel. I'm marking the center with a pencil. And I know that these pencil lines are hard to see on camera, but I can see them. And this is going to help me line up my circle in the center. I also have this seam that runs horizontal that will help me get it centered top to bottom. And then the pencil marks will help me center it left to right. So just as I did before, I'm adding glue, and I will take the valleys of that scallop circle, and that is where I will line it up with that seam going across and then the top and the bottom. And once I have that center one in place, I know that my other 2 will match up. Now I decided to overlap those scallop circles a little bit in the center so that the ones on the left and the right were not too close to the edge of the panel. And it kind of looks like one continuous doily behind all of them, sort of, and I like the way that that turned out. So I'm just lining it up, making sure it's straight, and then I scoot it towards that center circle until the wood between each of them kind of disappears in that center area between the scallops. Now that I have them all stuck down to my panel, I can start to embellish, and I am pulling out some Peppermint Lawn Trimmings twine. I'm going to use 2 lengths of it to create a double bow, and I will put a red and white twine bow on the cherries and the strawberries, and then as you can see there, I also have the yellow twine, and that will go on my circle with the lemons. So I'll just trim off the tails to the length that I need, and I will add a little dot of liquid glue right to that embroidery hoop frame. And then I'll just put this right into that dot of glue. And as that glue sets up, this will stay in place. I'm repeating the same thing with the strawberries and with the lemons as well. And then of course, nothing that I do is complete without a little bit of sparkle. So I have my Stardust stickles, and I'm just adding some spots of glitter to the leaves and the fruit. I love doing this on fruit because it looks like they've kind of been dusted with some magical glittery sugar, and I just think that that's a really fun look. Glitter like this always catches your eye and just adds a little bit extra to your project. And then here is my finished project. I think that this would be a super cute gift. This already has a hanger on it, but you could always just add some hangers if you needed to. This would be really fun to kind of hang or put in your kitchen, I think, because of the fruit. And I just love how that glitter catches the light. This was a really fun project to make. So here is another look at that project. And then here are some close-up pictures of each of the hoops with the fruit. So we have the cheery cherries with that blue gingham, which I just love. Here is our zesty lemons. And then here is the strawberry patch. I hope that this has inspired you to maybe look at your die cuts differently and make something new and unique. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.